If you have a hard time with boundaries, how might your life be different if you could say no as easily as a joyful yes? I'm Love Coach Mariya, and for over a decade now, I've been encouraging folks to empower their compassion so it's big enough for ourselves as well as others, and so our boundaries can become healthier than ever. You're listening to Empower Your Compassion, and on this show, we'll be unlocking transformative insights to help you reconnect to your true yes, so you can say no from that more expansive energy and get more of what you want in your relationships and your life without sacrificing your compassion. Are you ready for more love? Let's grow. Hello, friend. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Hester. She is the host of her own podcast, More Human, More Kind. She's also the author of Parenting with Pride. As a speaker, author, coach, and LGBTQ plus advocate, she helps parents, allies, and organizations move from fear to fierce, informed love with clarity, compassion, and courage. She believes in the magic of connection and that kindness and belonging aren't just a feeling, they're a practice. I'm delighted to have her on the show. Please help me welcome her. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining me. I'm delighted to have you on my show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. And speaking of podcasting, I know you have your own podcast as well, and it's More Human, More Kind. And I really love the name of that too. I think it's so important. I'm such an advocate of humanizing ourselves and each other and not dehumanizing each other, because I feel like that type of thing is always an operating system where if you're doing it outward, you're doing it inward somewhere too. And so I feel like self-love is such an important core foundational way that we can be the love we want to see in the world and receive as well, you know?
Oh my gosh. Yes. That was very beautifully said. Yes, I think it is a good reminder and also kind of permission, because I feel like there's a lot going on that perhaps gives permission for dehumanizing, and also just to kind of pull us out of that space of seeing each other as human, even if it's subconscious or you don't mean to. Let's remember and recognize and celebrate that we're all human.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of Brene Brown's Gifts of Imperfection.
Yes.
And being able to extend that grace and permission to ourselves as well to be human.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think that we have to do that first before we can do that outwardly, right? I mean, you can kind of fake it a little bit, but you can only go so far faking it until you have to be like, oh, wait, I need to actually understand what that feels like inside so I can really do it. So I can really walk like that consistently, or as consistently as possible, because we are human.
Right. Back to
that human piece. Oh my gosh.
Well, I know that you also, in your work, you talk a lot about parenting and relating to children. I don't have children of my own other than my own inner child, and I do like to follow resonant parenting advice from time to time for little tools and tips for, relating to and interacting with my own inner child. But bringing this back to boundaries as well, I feel like it's a really important thing that's still really confusing. There's not really enough information out there, and the stuff that isn't super helpful, because there's just a lot of nuanced differences. There's boundaries with yourself. There's boundaries in really close, intimate relationships. There's boundaries with acquaintances. There's boundaries at work. There's boundaries, with your kids. And there can be a lot of different elements to those different types of relationships and dynamics that can sort of impact the way that you kind of go about boundaries in that. I have found it there's a few different lenses you can put on to view boundaries, and there's a few different lenses that are true, and yet some of them I find a little bit more helpful than others. For example, one can just be where I end and you begin physically, that can be considered a boundary. But for more practical purposes, personal boundaries, I think it's really helpful to think of them as our resource limits. So time, energy, attention, money, etc. and managing them, like being responsible for them and recognizing that, there are limits to them. And on a side note, I say this all the time because it was a big stumbling block for me that I had to get over when I started seeing them as limits. I was like, oh, but then am I limiting myself? Aren't I supposed to have an abundance mindset? And when I remembered that like diamonds and gold are valuable because of their limited amounts, I was like, oh no, these are very precious. These are my precious resources. And I don't mean to get like precious about them, but but like have that sense of like stewardship and just be like, okay, I only have so many, and really see it as like the oxygen mask rule too. Like
Yes,
I
yes.
like I have to manage these things so that I have enough for the people and projects I care most about. Um,
Right.
and just honoring that level of responsibility. And I feel like in most situations it can be pretty functional to view them as resource limits, and therefore communicating about boundaries is really just kind of a gift of information about what you're going to do for you to take care of you and your resources,
Right.
and stay resourced so that you can show up how you want.
Right.
um,
Yeah, I like that. And I think that that's also a really helpful way to discuss them and to share them with other people, because again, I feel like there's a lack of education on what a boundary is, and so many people believe that boundaries are like against someone else, right? You set them against somebody or something, when
mhm.
really it's the opposite. So I think a lot of people hear the word boundary and it has a little bit of a negative connotation to it. It's gotten a bad rap, and so our job is to give it, a good rap. But to really teach people that, and this was such a freeing thing for me too, was to be like, oh wait, no, the boundaries for me, that's fully for me. It's I cannot do anything about how the other person receives it, right? That's not mine. That's theirs. Their response to it, their reaction to it is completely out of my control. All I can control is me. And so when I started practicing my personal boundaries with my parents, because it was not something that had ever been practiced before, it was very foreign to them. So they very much received me beginning to say, oh, that doesn't work for me anymore.
Sorry,
Um,
what?
yeah, right. That's exactly right. And so they did receive it very much as something I was doing to them. Right. So that is a difficult thing if you are a recovering people pleaser, if you are, coming from that place where you really are shifting your relationship with yourself and honoring yourself, that it's going to be really uncomfortable. But keeping in mind that you're not doing anything wrong. I'm not doing anything wrong, right? This is for me.
It's not about you. It's not against you. This is for
Right.
me.
And saying that and knowing that's theirs. Like however they take it is theirs. And you cannot do anything about that. And it could continue to be really uncomfortable, or they could continue to adjust.
Mhm.
So but either way, you can't control it. So I think it is that, like, when you begin to shift the, oh wait, I'm doing this to, like you said, like to honor or protect my resources, that helps you just shift the way you think about boundaries, the way that you approach them, the way that you
Mhm.
set them.
Mhm.
And it does become much more of an internal practice that you get better and better at the more that you do it.
Yeah. And speaking of recovering people pleasers, one of the things that I really endeavored to do with my coaching practice and, online presence and podcasts and all of this is really help. Like, I love creating stepping stones because a lot of times there's really great personal development, self-improvement advice out there, but it can be like a bridge too far. It's like no is a complete sentence is my favorite bad example of like that's not practical for people with nervous systems, wired to fawn. So my favorite thing to do is like follow a no with a yes. It makes it a lot more gentle to just say, hey, I'm not available for that, but I am available for this.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that it should be a true yes. It should not just be another self-abandonment, but
Right.
and sometimes the follow-up can just be acknowledgement, like, hey, I'm not available for that, but I really appreciate you. you know.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes. And they may or may not hear that, but it doesn't matter because you're saying that for yourself, because that
Exactly.
helps you a million totally helps settle your nervous system, right? It helps you
Absolutely.
like reconnect, stay online. Don't, my favorite it was to dissociate. So I'd be like, okay, come back on in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Click back in there. Yeah, you got this. Right. So
Hey friends, real quick, in case you're busy, which you probably are if you have a hard time with boundaries, I just wanted to make sure you know that you can go to boundariesthatfeelgood.com and download a free resource for making boundaries easier without sacrificing your compassion. Again, that's boundariesthatfeelgood.com. Okay, let's get back to the show. Well, and I feel like our culture has kind of normalized enmeshed codependence too. And the part of the reason we get so much pushback from our boundaries, especially from people like our parents, is that there's this like this entitlement to that enmeshment, and it all stems also from this like misplaced responsibility where you're not responsible for your feelings, I am, and I'm not responsible for my feelings, you are, and all of this stuff. And so it's like if I'm a no to your request and then you have feelings about it, it's my fault. And why am I doing this to you? And and then the guilt, it's the gut-wrenching guilt. And it's like the guilt is one of the biggest reasons we cave on our own boundaries, either because it's a preemptive guilt trip we take ourselves on, or we let someone else take us on it.
mm-hmm.
And speaking of following a no with a yes, if you're resourced for it, and someone gives you some pushback or, some sort of guilt trip, or they're questioning, your no, or they're begging you, or whatever type of arm twisting. My favorite sort of ideal response, and it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but it's basically like, I see that you're disappointed. Do you want to talk about that? And it's like, I'm not like, my decision is not up for discussion or negotiation. It's been made. And I can still be in connection with you as you kind of like process it, as long as and you have a boundary around that too, right? As long
Right.
as you're not going to like get all blamey and, um, like demonizing me or whatever. But like, if you have the capacity to just be like, oh, yeah, I do feel a little bit sad about that, but there's also love there. And I'm glad that you're caring for yourself, but I am sad. And it's like, I get that you're sad. It's understandable that it's sad.
Right, right. And I think you just had that's such an important word and concept, the capacity, like art
Mhm.
growing, because a lot of times where you may have been growing your capacity, you are in relationship with somebody who is not. And so recognizing what their capacity is, like acknowledging, like, oh, they just don't have the capacity to hold this or to understand this or to be able to be in connection in this way. Like it works for them this very specific way. And when you realize that you, in fact, are just not available for that anymore, how do you approach that? It becomes it is tricky. So I want to acknowledge that as well. That is an entirely possible thing, scenario that you will encounter.
Mhm.
And it is helpful to remember that not everyone is doing work to increase their nervous system capacity to hold a lot of things,
Right.
truths at once, right?
Yes, exactly.
So,
I
yeah,
also, I like, again, it's one of those things that it's kind of more for us. If we say, like, I see that you're disappointed, my decision's been made. Whatever's coming up for you, do you want to talk about that? Chances are they're not going to have the self-awareness, let alone the capacity to do that. And they'll probably get,
right.
and then you can just be like, okay, well, then let's talk about something else,
Right. Right. Exactly.
But at least,
Exactly.
you
It's a
created the space.
great tool and it is a great response. And I think it's also really good to just to have that so you don't go into whatever your, fight, freeze, or fawn response is, because it's so easy to kick back into that when you are, with the people who activate you the most, to when you're practicing this work that you've been doing and it doesn't go as planned. And then you're like, oh, well, what do I do now? because that was not the response. I was practicing my head in the shower for an hour, you know? So very helpful to have these little things in your pocket.
Yeah. And also, coming back to capacity, I actually find capacity is a really broad category of boundaries. Like it is like, because if we talk about boundaries being resource limits, your capacity, like the limits of your capacity is also a thing.
Mhm.
And part of developing healthy boundaries is not just managing our own boundaries, but also respecting other people's boundaries. And the beautiful thing about seeing capacity as a boundary is that it's a way, and I'm not advocating for like managing other people's boundaries for them, which we as people pleasers do a lot, but you can at least be respectful of other people's boundaries even when they're not aware of them, when you're viewing that through the lens of capacity and you're just meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting them to show up for you in a particular way and they're just demonstrating that they don't have the capacity to, then you can be like, oh, that's a boundary. They might not even be aware of that, but I see that this is a boundary of theirs and I'm just going to respect that. And I'm not going to expect more from them than what they're demonstrating they're capable of.
Yes. Yes. And I think that is so, so important because it is so easy to be like, especially when you are in a place of doing your work and growing, to think, well, why isn't this person also growing? Like, why don't they get this? Why don't they understand what I'm saying or what all of these things, to be aware of, oh, wait, they just don't have the capacity for that. Right. And
Mhm.
that is, it just is.
Yes.
And I think too, in recognizing that, there may be a little grief that goes along with that. And I think that
Yes.
that is a completely something that we also, it is good to talk about and to normalize and to recognize and allow yourself, let yourself have it, because it is very, very real.
I heard a great definition of grief one time, and it was the loss of possibility.
Mm, yeah.
And sometimes I mean, possibility is kind of always abstract anyway, but sometimes the possibility is really only in our head. Like we see the possibility or of like their potential or what the relationship dynamic could be or whatever. And when you really, really accept their capacity, like, yeah, there is some grief. You're letting go of that possibility, or at least just, shelving it. Um,
Right.
and there is grief, but I also find that like with it, there's also a lot of peace because you stop kind of fighting against what is.
Yes. Yes. Well, you stop expecting,
Yeah.
right?
And then getting disappointed
And then getting
repeatedly.
disappointed over and over again.
And I think that love, if we treat love as a verb, I think it often looks like acceptance.
Mhm.
And kind of in that Buddhist sense, not necessarily, resignation or any sort of like, submitting to some miserable existence or state or something, but just really accepting that, okay, this is where they're at.
Mhm.
And simultaneously, we also have to accept where we're at too. And so when
Mhm.
you realize that, because another thing that people pleasers will do a lot is at least in my experience, I will come to some level of acceptance of where someone is at. And I'll be like, okay, I can meet them there. And then what I end up doing is like, I accept that where they're at in their alignment. And then I pull myself out of alignment to meet them there when in reality, we are not aligned. And
Right.
so when you can accept where they're at and the limits of their capacity and where you're at and like what your actual needs are and the fact that there's a gap there.
Yeah.
And then that's when you can really just accept that, there's probably this one of the most common examples of this is like friendships where you
Mhm.
realize at some point that you're the only one carrying it and you're like, what happens if I set it down? And then like you never hear from them again. And you're like, oh, it was me. I was the one carrying this the whole
Yeah,
time.
exactly. It
Mhm.
is, oh my gosh, that is a really hard one. And I think also with friendships, we're all growing and changing all the time, right? And
Yeah.
oftentimes we grow and change in different ways.
Mhm.
And so, whether you just continue the friendship out of just because it's been there for so long, but you realize you're growing further, right? The things that you have in common, or the conversations, the depth of conversation that you can have, changes over time.
Mhm.
So then it becomes well, do I want this? Does this work still? Do I keep it just because, right?
Mhm.
So it does bring up a lot of questions worth asking yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a huge advocate also of change dynamics, not people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and it doesn't always have to be black or white either. Like sometimes all you do is just kind of like dial back your involvement. And you're like, okay, maybe we only touch base, on Christmas.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You figure out what works. And again, to your point, what works for you without pulling yourself out of alignment, disconnecting yourself from yourself, right? Because, now that we're in that space, we realize how precious it is. And I think the more that, you practice staying in alignment and working and living from that space, it's easier to you feel it faster when you disconnect. And protecting that is important.
Yeah,
Really
it
important.
is. And I think when we get enough lived experience in our alignment and we start to realize how much more like effective and impactful and thriving we are there, we start to notice that like the cost of stepping out of that isn't just personal, but it's like the impact that we can have on the world is diminished when we step out of our alignment.
Oh gosh, yeah. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah.
And it brings me back to that oxygen mask thing. So like the reason this podcast is called Empower Your Compassion is because I feel like there's on a semi-related side note, there's this common message that we're supposed to like sacrifice our compassion in order to become empowered and boundaried. And I'm like, wait, no, I think actually, if we empower our compassion, it can become big enough for ourselves as well as others.
Oh yeah.
And so, with that, like normalized enmeshed codependence and misplaced responsibility, we feel like boundaries are mean because they're actually like individuating, which feels violent from that lens. And so, we end up with these like flimsy fences and spiked walls. And it's just like, hey, we can install selective gates that kind of are a lot more loving
Mhm.
and even fluid, but yet fixed. Like it's just, this is what I'm available for. The door is open. You're effectively giving people the keys to accessing you through these gates that you've installed. And there's nothing about stopping loving other people in order. It's not I can love them or I can love me. It's not this wall that you have to choose sides on, right? And
Right.
so when you see that having boundaries doesn't mean you have to stop loving other people to start loving yourself more, that it can just be big enough for both of you,
Yes.
then that gets kind of back to that
Mhm.
oxygen mask thing too. And it's like I want to keep like for me again as like a stepping stone with as a recovering people pleaser, it was so much easier to realize that like, oh, boundaries are in service to my relationships, right?
Mhm.
Because they're what like help me stay resourced for
Right.
these things I care about. So I
Yeah.
really love like encouraging people to like, for lack of a better word, like capitalize on that. Like you have a big heart. We don't have to shrink it. Let's like free it.
Right. Well, and I think too, like I liked how you described them as being fluid, because that was a game changer for me. When I realized, oh, this isn't like I'm setting this boundary and it's for now until the end of time. It's for now, for this moment. And so I think when you think of it in a fluid sense, that helps with that, like, oh, like this is expansive. It actually allows you to be more expansive because you're not using all of your energy running around like doing and taking care of all the things that weren't yours to take care of to begin with, right? And so in a weird way, it does actually give you more energy to be more compassionate, more empathetic, more all of these things.
Yeah, it's wildly paradoxical.
It is. It is. And not until you try. And then when you try, you're like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't I know this how many years ago? Yeah.
I know, right?
Which is why I literally am like, teaching my kids all of this stuff now. I'm like, do you know how lucky you are to know this at
At this
age
age.
16, 18, 20? Oh my gosh. You are going to rule the world. So grateful. Yeah.
I think that it's like one of the things that helped me start to recognize that paradox, I guess, is um sort of circling back to one of the other lenses, like seeing boundaries as like our physical limits,
Mm.
and also seeing boundaries as, sort of a masculine yang, like their structure. They support our like creative expression, our authenticity. They provide structures for our lives to flow in authentic alignment with our values and goals. And so the more you have those in place, the more sort of like, abundantly things can flow. But when you think about even just your body, like your skin and bones provide the structure for your body. And I mean, in some way, you could kind of see that as limiting because, like, on the opposite, we could just be this like blob, but you can't do much. You're not very effective as a blob, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
like, yeah.
That is a good visual. Yes, I like that. That's really good.
And I feel like that's what we end up doing as people pleasers. We turn into these like
Oh,
ineffectual blobs. We're just leaky all over the place.
all over the place. Why I remember this, I don't know. But you know how you remember like the weirdest things you
Yes.
say at weird points in your life?
Uh-huh.
Whatever I was going through, which I don't remember that, I had said, I feel like I wake up every day and I try to decide who do I need to be today. And that's what it's like to be a people pleaser. Like, who do I need to be to make all of these people happy around me, right?
Mm.
To do all the things that I feel like I should do or
Mhm.
I'm being asked to do that I've never learned how to say no to, whatever. But it is that the idea of being the blob that is so ineffective. I mean, it's so just you end up that's how you get burned out, and that's how a lot just a plethora of things happen. So
Yes.
blob, not good.
Right. Yeah, I find that burnout and resentment are like two of the biggest sort of side effects of poor
Mhm.
boundaries that I hear about. For
Yeah.
me, though, and I love throwing this one out here because I don't hear about it a lot, but it was my experience, and I do find resonance sometimes when I talk about it. But I wasn't really experiencing much burnout or resentment, and people were telling me I needed better boundaries, but I was like, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm doing or giving anything I don't want to. But I hadn't seen yet how, I mean, it was like the water I was swimming in or the air I was breathing, like how chameleon-y I was.
Yeah.
And I, what I did start to notice was that in a lot of my relationships, I wasn't really feeling very seen or appreciated.
Yeah.
And that's because when you're in fawning mode, you're constantly self-abandoning and you're constantly contorting yourself to whatever you think the situation calls for. And therefore, you're not ever really being you. And therefore, you're not really ever being seen as you. So you don't really feel seen, but you don't know why. And
Right.
that's why.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. I was the same way. I did have some resentment going on. But it was very much of the just not ever, being seen. And because I learned to be an incredible chameleon, who do I need to be? What do
Mhm.
I need to quote unquote look like to be in this situation?
Yeah.
Or I mean, it's wild. And I know a lot, it did very much, it started out very much as a survival technique as a child, right?
Right.
But then it like morphs over time and turns into just this massively destructive thing that you do to yourself. Without even, and the thing is because it works. People love it. People love a
Yeah.
people pleaser. I mean,
Yes.
who's not going to love somebody who's like, how can I serve you? How can I
Right.
twist myself into a million knots and make myself sick and all the things, right? To make your life as easy as possible.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And
people
it
don't
does
like it when
work.
you take that away.
No, I'm sorry. Wait, what? What is happening? Why are you doing this to me?
Exactly. Yes. And that's why you get the why are you doing this to me?
Yep.
Right. When you're not doing anything to them.
Yeah.
You're finally seeing yourself. So it's good. It's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, having developed that as a coping mechanism as a child, I think that it's also, speaking of self-compassion, I think it's really helpful to just recognize and acknowledge that, because a lot of people, when you have poor boundaries, a lot of people tell you you need to like love yourself better. And and it's like it's really well intended, but then it feels shaming in a way too. And so I love telling people, like people pleasers and recovering people pleasers, I'm like, you are trying to love yourself. You're just doing it badly. Like subconsciously, when you grow up feeling responsible for other people's feelings, because you were little and you needed them to feel okay so you could feel okay and safe, you take that on, you take on that responsibility, when your caregivers didn't really demonstrate otherwise. Um, and so you start prioritizing other people's needs, not over your own, but as your own. Like
Right.
you are managing everybody else and keeping everybody else pleased and happy and whatnot as a survival mechanism, as a safety
Mhm.
mechanism. So it is self-care. It's just dysfunctional. So
Right. Right.
let's, I love saying like you've got the thing, let's just like build on it differently.
Exactly. It just needs to be shifted
Right. Let's
a
just
little bit.
rearrange that.
You understand the concept.
Right.
Concept good.
Yeah.
Oh my
But
goodness.
when you have that, like the other like side effect of developing that way is you end up with this external orientation. You're
Mhm.
constantly seeking outside sources of safety and security. And it's like, I think it's also helpful to just recognize that like that's a normal part of development. We just skip the step where we learn to internalize it. And so we get to do it when we're older and it's a little bit harder, but you still can. And so
Right.
I feel like the cure to poor boundaries is rooting your security within.
Yes.
And it's a journey, it's a process. It's
Oh,
not something you can do overnight, but once you
oh,
do that, then it's not just about doing boundaries or saying no or whatever. You become a boundaried person because you start to realize that, like, oh, if they're not okay, I'm okay. And I've got my back. And it's scary if I'm going to say no and they might get all upset, but like, I know I've got my back. My security is rooted within me. And then
right.
that's how you can start to brave the risk of rejection that's inherent in honoring your truth.
It is. Yes, it is. And I will second you that it is a journey and it's hard. So just know that
Mhm.
that you can do it.
Yeah.
And I think the other piece of that too, I was just thinking, was that you seek that validation from the exterior as well. So it's also learning to like flip
Self-
that,
Yeah.
which is that also hard. But I will say, I think, the once you become aware of it,
Mhm.
that might be the hardest piece is like acknowledging that and being like, oh, that's me. I do that. I see how I'm doing that. Okay, now what do I need to do? Like what are the steps, baby steps, and recognizing that, like pulling that shame piece out of there. And because that is a huge, especially, it just is. I shouldn't say especially anything. It just is. And giving yourself a lot of grace.
And I think that bringing it back to boundaries, when we recognize that, we're just managing our resource limits, it's not a good or a bad thing, and people are going to have their moralistic judgments about our boundaries and our limits and how it impacts them. And
Right.
just, recognizing for ourselves that it's not about punishing, to your point, or like this boundary isn't to punish you, it's just to care for myself. And if it's having a negative impact on you, like that sucks. That's not my intention. I can hold your hand through it if I'm resourced to do that. But,
Right.
this is what it is. And it's not personal. It's not a personal rejection. That's one of the things I love about following a no with a yes, is it helps it
Yeah.
feel like I'm not rejecting you. I'm just a no to this thing. And it's not even about judging the thing. It's just that I'm not available for it, or I don't have the resources for it, or I'm not
Right.
interested in it, but I think it's cool that you are, and it just can be about alignment. And then also when you receive other people's boundaries or encounter their capacity limits, it can just be like, that's just not aligned for me. And it's not about that there's something wrong with them or they're a piece of shit or that you're weak or that you're a piece of shit because you can't be strong enough to tolerate their low capacity. All of these stories.
I the stories we write, the stories we create in our heads, right? To
Mm,
help us cope. I think sometimes it's coping,
mhm.
this is also helps us walk through the world in a way that just feels better. It's
I mean, I
kinder
think
to
so.
yourself. It's kinder. It takes a lot of the expectation out of others, right? What you expect from others' behavior, good, bad, or otherwise, right? And allows you to put that energy from that expectation into, staying aligned, evolving and growing yourself, right? And it becomes easier to stand in that, and in whatever you know your boundaried space is at that moment. um every time you do that, it becomes easier.
Mhm.
And so it sounds hard, again, I think because we are initially fighting against the negative reputation of boundaries. And
Mhm.
once we understand that they in fact are not, and we start sharing that with others, like that's kind of one of our many things that we can do to make the world a better place.
Right, model healthy boundaries.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I will say too, though, you and I are finding that it feels better on this side of it. And just throwing a little caveat out there also for our listeners is that it feels not great to go through it. And to be more specific, the ego loves the drama of moral judgments. And so when your nervous system is wired for that, type of what is it, amplitude, I guess, of the frequency,
mhm,
um, starting to like neutralize things is gonna feel really uncomfortable because it's like it's too quiet. Like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like expecting the drama, and sometimes your subconscious will like go create it if it's not there because it just doesn't feel right without it.
right.
And so the discomfort really is about making that transition into like a more peaceful state that you will on some level fight against for a little while moving
Mhm.
through it.
Yeah, it's like a detox.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So,
Oh man.
whew.
And that's where it comes in really handy to have a trusted outsider such as a coach to help with that. So I know that that's some services that you provide. Would you tell our listeners a little bit more, like how they can learn about you, find out about you, work with you?
Absolutely, yes. So I do right now, I work specifically with parents of LGBTQ kids.
Mm.
And so it is pretty specific, the work that I do. But you can learn more about all the things that I do on my website, which is heatherhester.net. But my podcast is talked about there, my book, um, my coaching, the community, all the things. So yes, I just it is a passion, and I do love it very much. So go
Awesome.
check it out.
Wonderful. And I'll include some links in the show notes. And, you know, any sort of adapting or adjusting to something that's different is gonna be pretty much the same discomfort that I was talking about. Like you're shifting things, your subconscious, your nervous system is going to have some reactions to it. And so that's why having that sort of outside support can really help you like navigate that discomfort. And of course, listeners, you can learn more about me through my stuff. I'll throw links in the show notes for that as well. And thank you again, Heather, so much. I feel like we could talk all day, but just to be respectful of your and the audience's time, we'll go ahead and wrap it here.
I agree. This was really, really wonderful. Thank
It
you.
was delightful. Thanks again. Oh, I just love those deep, broad conversations with kindred souls. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And if you would like some targeted support with your boundaries, please go to boundariesthatfeelgood.com and you can download my free PDF that breaks down my signature gates method and provides a lot of really helpful insights, perspectives, and tools so that you can stay boundaried and connected and build healthier, more loving relationships. And while you're here, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this show so we can spread the love. Wherever you're at on your journey, I send you so much love and courage. Namaste.